Hello, this is Trent. I am Bunmi Obanawu. And as always, there's Moses Omoghena right here beside me. He's always on my case about tweeting.
Yep, what can I do? It's my job.
I promise to repent. I promise. So
What's up with you?
trending? Oh, I'm fine.
A lot has been trending. Two very, significant issues. One has been trending for weeks now, and one just came up, a few days back. Now, the very first one, of course, that we know is hashtag Bring Back Our Girls. It's the 80th day that, the Chibok girls were abducted and are still missing. Now, that also makes it the 37th day in which the Chief of Defense Staff, Alex Bade, came on national TV and told Nigerians that they know the whereabouts of these girls and that a rescue plan to rescue these girls is in advanced stage. But it's day 80 now,
So
and these girls are still missing. So maybe at some point we'll need him to tell us why the plan is still advancing. I don't know. Now, that's been that. When all these things happen, you only but question and wonder, like, all the efforts, the hashtag activism, the demonstrations, the campaigns, it somewhat comes off as a waste. We hope not, but that's the impression that we get. We all what's been happening now on the part of the government. As usual, there seems to be a laid-back, a slow or snail, effort on their part, where, for instance, the campaign and the demonstrations in Abuja was cancelled, it was stopped a few months back, where the FCT security man said that nobody should come up to campaign for the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls in Abuja. And on this part of, Nigeria, we're hoping that this will act as a constant check or constant reminder to the presidency, like, hey, these girls are still missing, they're still not found. What are you doing about it? But that's been swept under the carpet and nothing is yet to be done. But we hope that, more pressure is being put on the presidency and more efforts, new strategies are being brought up to bring these girls alive.
Although we should also add that recently a chief top official in Boko Haram was arrested or alleged to have been arrested, by the security officials. So that's something. You
seem to even know more than me. Well done for me. Now, the next hashtag is, hashtag Occupy Flagstaff House. Now, Flagstaff House is the presidential villa in Ghana. So occupying Flagstaff House is more like what I will call a sort of a revolution in Ghana. Now, the reason for this protest were the reasons of corruption, of infrastructure decay, and what was the third one again? Infrastructure decay and misuse of public funds. And it wasn't exactly that, but my brain cells are really gloomy right now. So basically, these, of course, are the major issues, African nations cry about against their leaders. So now Ghanaians are saying, you know what? They marched to the flag house in Accra, and they are going to submit a petition to the president, Mahama, and say that, you know what, we are sick and tired of living in worsening conditions. We demand the best. We demand, transparency. We demand a good life. We demand light, water, and basic amenities. So that started on 1st of July, which happens to be the 54th, Republican Day for Ghana. So it was a very significant march, and there's still a big question mark on it. Nothing is yet to be said about it, or nothing is yet no results yet. So we're hoping and we're on the issue, basically, right now. So those are the two, hashtag Bring Back Our Girls and hashtag Occupy Flag House in Ghana.
Yeah, I actually have been following that one.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
It is.
Okay. So, as you all know, you can join the conversation by sharing your views with us via Twitter at TVC Trends, comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/TVC Trends, and send your pictures and video comments to the trends at tvcnews.tv. A mouthful there. Okay, now the existence of militant religious groups is not a new phenomenon in Africa, but their increasing presence and violent activities have become a growing concern, we must agree. This year alone, scores of people have lost their lives in attacks orchestrated by terrorist groups in various regions of the continent. Now, these main groups are Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb based in Algeria. As a result of religious fanaticism, tribal ethnic tensions, and political instability, Africa has become a fertile ground for extremism, thereby hampering development. What needs to be done to reduce this wave of growing insecurity across the continent? A very big question there. Well, that's our focus today on the program, but first of all, have a look at this.
The September 21st attack on Nairobi's Westgate shopping mall by Somalia's Al-Shabaab militants was a shocking event in generally peaceful Nairobi. A week later, across the continent, the midnight killing of dozens of students at a college in Nigeria was equally shocking but less surprising. There, the government is at war with the radical Islamist sect Boko Haram. Rising militancy in Nigeria and Somalia, as well as Mali, Libya, and several other African countries, has killed thousands in terrorist attacks and civil wars. And for the most part, it's linked to local grievances, according to Africa expert Jason Mosley of London's Chatham House Research Organization, speaking via Skype.
Terrorism, broadly speaking, in Africa is still tightly constrained to regional or local political dynamics.
Poverty, corruption, and political frustration create fertile ground for radicalism, but there is at least an ideological link to global militant Islam, says the director of the King's College Center for the Study of Radicalism, Alexander Meliagru Hitchens.
I don't think any of these groups are directed, specifically by Al-Qaeda Central. I mean, they are affiliated, they are fellow travelers, they follow the same ideology. But yes, a lot of these groups in Africa do have also local concerns, and some of them are actually divided.
For example, Meliagru Hitchens says not all members of Al-Shabaab support launching attacks outside of Somalia, like the one in Nairobi, even though Kenya has troops on Somali territory. But while poverty and other local issues spawn militant groups in many parts of the continent, Jason Mosley says the number of recruits remains small, while the problems that motivate them are big and difficult to solve.
De-radicalization efforts that are underway in places like Kenya or Somalia are one track. And of course, ultimately and broadly speaking, the real answer is economic opportunity. This is more difficult than it sounds.
And experts say that's particularly true in the areas where it's needed most, Africa's poorest and most troubled countries.
It's likely that this problem, this trend of jihadist activity in Africa will continue in the foreseeable future, simply because the problems on which the recruitment and the spread is based, like the poverty, like the corruption, are going to remain for quite some time.
Experts say the combination of economic opportunity, education, and leadership that could ensure that children like these don't grow up to be militants is hard to come by and ever more urgently needed.
An interesting package there. We must agree that there's a lot happening in Africa.
There is.
Ugh.
There is. I usually, when you look at Africa, you just think, okay, poverty, corruption, but now terrorism is part of the picture.
Lives are being lost every day, people, properties, and it's really sad, isn't it?
Africa used to be one of the most peaceful regions in the world, and
well, we've had our problems. We've had our problems, but yes, it's really sad. And looking at that report, another thing is the fact that quite a lot of these groups that are causing havoc have roots in, like someone was pointing out, politics or in religion. So they're kind of regional, aren't they? So
okay.
It's not.
Let's leave that, let's leave that for the main discussion. You seem very itchy to start.
I am, right? Okay, so let's leave this for the main discussion. And joining us to do justice to this today, we have Cyril Abaku. He's a senior researcher on African affairs for TVC News. And via Skype, we have Dr. Mahari Maru. He's the international consultant on African affairs. And also we have Dr. Ona Ekoimu. He's a security expert. So we have a lot of people who are very, knowledgeable about these things.
Yeah.
Now, these are not the best times for many African countries in Africa, as we have probably heard already. But what is Africa not doing right? And I would like to address this question to Maru. If you can hear me, Dr. Maru, can you hear me? What is Africa not doing right?
I can.
Why all the insecurity problems?
Well, first, I think yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
if you can hear me.
I can. Please
Yes, I
continue.
can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can. We can go.
Can you hear me? Well, I think there are three actors, three driving forces in Africa. The first one is the state. The nature of state in Africa,
Okay.
and the nature of state
Please continue.
and the state has been known for the fact that they are strong. African states are strong on wrong functions such as deception, misgovernance, misuse of forces, and they have been strong also on deception and surveillance and so on. At the same time, states are weak on the right functions, mainly on the provision of human security to African and their population.
Okay.
As a result, you have increasing grievances on the local population.
Okay.
And this has led to non-state actors, insurgent groups, terrorist groups, and other actors, even private military and security firms, to play a role in fomenting the grievances and using these grievances to promote and pursue their individual interests
All
of
right.
political nature. So you have a mix of this, the state being weak, and as we have seen it, it's not because Boko Haram is strong that
Okay.
it's launching attack in Nigeria.
All right. Okay.
It's because the Nigerian government is weak that we have this kind of attacks.
Wow, that's
It's
very
not
direct. I like-
Al-Shabaab strong that we see these attacks in Kenya. It's the Kenyan government which is weak to
Okay.
respond to the grievances of the population, but at the same time of this.
Okay, let me hold you right there, Dr. Marco, and bring Cyril into this.
it, yeah.
Now, he blames the states. He blames the government. The government isn't doing what it needs to do, and that is why certain parts of the country or the region is reacting the way that we can see right now. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I would like to agree with him on one point, but let me differ a little. We have seen recently in America when we had Occupy. We have also seen countries like Ukraine, countries where for the sake of misgovernance and for the sake of poor leadership, when things don't turn out the way people expect them to turn out, because people have given government a mandate, and because government is not returning fairly on that mandate, they rise up. Anytime there's a failure of government, there's always an uprising. You cannot take it away from people, but when we rise, what are we rising to achieve? I do not think that our rising should give birth to further problems. I think that if people are going to rise up, to demand fairness, to demand justice, they should do it in a way that, that eventually promotes the greater good. Yes, governments are weak across Africa. It's a plain fact. But we, the people who make the government, when a government we elect does not return fairly, what should we be doing? Should we compound the issues or should we look for solutions? So I think until African people, and now I'm talking about non-state actors, become solution finders, have this orientation that we are the solution to the problem. Government is just a handful of people, but but the masses are more in number. So until we the people wake up to realize that we are actually the solution providers, we will continue to go around this circle.
Okay, but wait, Doctor, I know you want to jump in, but Dr. Maru, let me just challenge you on something you said. Now, if it's the state that has failed, looking at some of the groups that have come up, they're not coming up necessarily to, speak for the right to have a better life, but they want, like for Al-Shabaab, they want a Muslim state. So that's not exactly because the government has failed to give them something, but because they want something that they can't get at the moment. So wouldn't you say that we can't all blame it on the inefficiency of the state or the government?
Well,
Please continue.
Clearly that is true. There is a political agenda. It's a competition, how many followers you will have. And states in Africa are failing to have as many followers to go in the legal area. That's the reason why you have increasingly followers that are disenfranchised from the states and the government following Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and so on. If we have the first line of argument is that the public is following a clear indication that some of the things that these terrorist organizations are providing, if we take Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, some of the things that they do, apart from the violence and attacks, the extremist point of view, and using violence as a means to propagate their political agenda, is what is being rejected. Otherwise, the population in some instances do support them when there is no law and order, when there is no basic service, when there is no justice. They will follow these groups because they have seen the governments and legitimate authorities failing to enjoy the legitimacy, the popular legitimacy, and the performance legitimacy that a government has to enjoy so that it will be accepted by its population. Now, in this kind of gap, non-state actors, including terrorist groups, try to use the grievances, legitimate grievances of the population, to use it for their political agenda. If you see at Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, the leadership level is determined political ideology that wants to impose its political view and religious view on the population by force.
All right.
If it was peacefully, it would have been accepted as any other religious organization.
Okay.
But it's by force that they want to impose. That's the reason why it becomes terrorism, and it becomes also unacceptable, and that should be dealt with. But in dealing to these threats of terrorism and counter-violent extremism, generally, you have to deal first on the political front. AK-47 cannot solve.
All right, Dr. Mehari, thank you. Let me throw this to you now. From what you've said and what Doctor has said, the causes of where Africa went wrong, they seem to be inwards. Now, do you think that most of the factors that contribute to acts of terrorism and insecurity in Africa, are they totally Afrocentric? Are there like some external factors that have key roles to play in this? What are your thoughts?
No, I think in all the places we have seen terrorism spring up, there have both been the global and the local dimensions to it. There's got to be a local cannon fodder, a casus belli of some sort, that the locals will like to lay their hands on as a reason, as a grievance for what they are doing. For instance, I mean, our governments are just not responsive. Look at Boko Haram, for instance. We know there's corruption. We know there is poverty. We know there's unemployment. And our governments are only paying lip service. But do you also know that in northern Nigeria, on the axis that borders with Chad, the Lake Chad Basin is drying up. There's desertification. And this Lake Chad was where most of those youths used to go. They go, they fish, they have a means of livelihood, they sell those their catch to nearby countries, they sell some in Nigeria. But as the desert continued to encroach on the land, and government was not looking for alternative means of providing jobs for these youths, they resort to crime. This is the issue. It is both local, it is also global. But I think that the global dimension may always be there. There's Al-Qaeda, there are 1,001 groups. But I think that if government takes care of the local reasons, the easy things that these young men can easily lay their hands on, if we tackle unemployment, if we deal with corruption, if we deal with poverty, you realize that it's going to be difficult for whoever is somewhere trying to send money or trying to radicalize someone to say, you're poor, government does not care about you, take to arms. And it's going to be looking at them and say, well, my government has given me all of this, and I ask, why? Yeah.
Okay, but earlier
now, let's talk about.
Tweets, right?
It's interesting when you talked about dealing with poverty and idleness and all that. Let's talk about insecurity and the economy. Yeah. Now, Nigeria is said to be the largest economy in the world and about the 26th in the world. Yeah, largest in Africa and 26th in the world. Now, with the insecurity, problems going on, stakeholders fear that it may become, a very uncomfortable zone for business, ventures and investment. don't you think it's a matter of time that we'll lose that title?
Well, the point is, even the fact that the economy of Nigeria was rebased recently to become the largest in Africa, it meant that it had actually always been potentially bigger. Because rebasing meant that they only calculated and added certain sectors that they had not calculated officially. Otherwise, in the reality of it, it was always there. And let me tell you, even in northern Nigeria, you hear that they bombed a marketplace and scores of people died because terrorists know that markets will always be there. And because people will always go there to buy and sell. It's basic human nature. You can't take it away. And for now that the government has a window whereby we know that the crisis is still mainly in the north, it hasn't crossed to the south. Wole Soyinka granted an interview some days ago, the Nobel laureate, and he was saying that, ironically, this crisis is uniting Nigerians. There are a lot of positives that we can pick from it. It's just for us to open our eyes to see the window of opportunity, open even in face of this crisis, and catching on it. And we can do a lot of good things.
Let me. I'm sure Dr. Mehari wants to react to this. Dr. What do you think is the economic implication of the insecurity problems in Africa?
Well, my brother's analysis I heard, and the first point that we have to look is basically, first, the politicians are using public service for private purpose. Public service has become as a racket for accumulation of resources and wealth. Secondly, it's only when the state is weak that terrorist organizations can attack. If state is strong, there is no reason why terrorist attack will have a chance to attack countries in the manner they are attacking. There might be some attacks that can escape from the purview of the state and state security, but not specifically like we see in different countries. Secondly, and more importantly, if the population is behind the government in its fight against terrorism, there is no room for this kind of movement to prosper and promote their agenda. The economic aspect is simple. The thesis is when you have corruption, when public service is used as a means to amass wealth, then you will have other elements also to use it for this purpose, and there will not be a unified state structure, strong institutions to run against this kind of illegal movements and illegal attacks.
Okay, Dr.
So
Maru, I want to come in there now.
To look. So the
Dr. Maru, looking at what we have, some of the things we have said earlier, let's take a look at border control system and the proliferation of arms into the continent. Where are they getting these arms from? Let's explore this for a minute, So let's look outside Africa. So we have border control system and arms proliferation in the on the continent, rather. Where are these things coming from?
No.
How are members of Boko Haram, members of Al-Shabaab, members of Al-Qaeda, how are they arming themselves? Where are they getting these ammunitions from?
Basically, there are external elements. Earlier, I mentioned the state being weak in the right functions of ensuring human security. And then I said also the political forces, they are being used as a mobilization on undemocratic platforms of religious kind or ethnic kind. Now, the third element is, of course, there are international actors who are using the situation, the weaknesses of Africa to exploit it, and in many ways for their own greedy purpose. Now, border is not an African making in Africa. There are nations, there are ethnic and other kind of markers that are not limited by border. And states should not necessarily control their border. They have to manage and govern it. Otherwise, population has to move, and we want integration to happen.
Okay.
We need good migration, good mobility, but we want also to fight bad mobility, bad items, bad goods also to move from one country to another. So Border management is necessary, and they move from one place to another. But the main reason, again, why the border is still porous and it's not ungovernable or ungoverned is because our state institutions are weak.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Maru. We've heard quite a lot already about insecurity in Africa and how we can move ahead of this. Now, this is how far we can go. But remember, the conversation doesn't end in the studio. Instead, go online and continue the conversation. Let's see those tweets and see those Facebook comments. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.